Dr. David Cartland is a fully qualified doctor and general physician. His first-class honors degree in biomedical science include a year of specialist immunology and microbiology virology training, including statistical analysis. We discuss life in the UK, how he is feeling since being vaccinated, healthcare in Europe, border crisis, Silicon Valley Bank, and much more. Please subscribe, like, and share this podcast. On this episode of Coffee and a Mic, the mic is on, and I welcome Dr. David Cartland. Doctor, I wanted to start with this because you said something that hit the head on that, totally hit it on point. You don't like when people send you questions because then you start overthinking, and to me, and that is how I do this, because it's all about just having a conversation. I am not an interviewer. I'm not a journalist. I'm not any of those things. I'm just a guy who I feel like I was a terrible listener, and I think that in order for me to work on it, I started this. And that way I have to listen because it's not about me. It's about the people that I'm talking to. So, thank you for doing this.
No, my pleasure.
Do you, in all your doing, do you find it better to just have conversations rather than get
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've done lots of podcasts now. Most of them have been deleted from the internet history now, but the ones that are existing are on a Rumble channel somewhere. But yeah, I don't like to think about it. It's like, say, conversation is best. See where the questions take us.
Yeah, see, I mean, I don't know how you feel as of lately. I'm kind of in a mixed state where I get very, very down with things, but I also, people point out to me that there are good things happening. But when we're talking about censorship, Twitter has been it's been a lot of fun since Elon took over. Yeah. But yet Instagram and YouTube, I mean, it seems like they're just clamping down even harder.
Yeah, well, we saw this week with the Congress meeting, haven't we? On one of the particular days, they focused on this, and I'm pretty much a victim of that. So my background is, I'm a scientist and I'm a doctor, so I've got sort of dual training. I was a biomedical science graduate from the first degree, did a master's in between where I became a public scientist in angiogenesis, and then I did a degree in medicine. And since graduating, I've done 12, 15 years, I think now, 15 years of medical practice, and so the reason I say that is only firstly to buy a few seconds of somebody's time in a conversation in a coffee room, and you have to give your credentials first, but secondly to show that why is a doctor and a scientist censored like they are. So I am completely banned permanently from Facebook. I'm completely banned from Instagram, completely banned from LinkedIn, completely banned from TikTok, completely banned from YouTube. The only one that I've got now is Twitter. And each time, I've been banned for reasons undisclosed, other than breaking community guidelines and on COVID misinformation. But no one ever tells you what that misinformation is, and they certainly don't provide you with the data that refutes why it is misinformation. So I find it really bizarre. So yeah, since Twitter have brought everyone back in, it's become what we've always asked for: an open debate, a discussion, rebuttal. I'll show you my data, you show me yours, and we'll have a chat about it. But unfortunately, it's not a two-way conversation on these social media platforms, because the other side of the narrative aren't up for discussion. They're up for shouting names at you, calling you this, that, and the other. They've got plenty of labels: anti-vaxxer, I'm a vaccinated anti-vaxxer, so that's even more interesting. So it's really a bizarre concept that a scientist and a doctor should be censored and just bullied pretty much online. And then if you say anything back, you're banned for harassment and bullying, even though you can be called all the names under the sun by people on the opposite side of the narrative. So yeah, really strange times in the world of social media, but better conversations being had, lots of conversions to the correct side as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and there's zero accountability now. You can say whatever you want. I reference the fact that I'm so glad I grew up when I did, in a sense of, because there were no iPhones, there was no no tracing, not tracing, but you did something stupid and it was gone. But you also were held accountable. Like if you ran your mouth, right? If you were going to, pardon my language, if you're going to talk shit to people, you get your ass kicked. Today's world, you can hide behind everything and just a flick of a switch cut somebody off.
Yeah, most of the trolls tend to have that about them. They've got sort of odd, weird names, strange avatars as their profile. I mean, from the very beginning, I've been me. I've been proud to have my position and back it with data, and my opinions are always back with reference, and I'll put my name to it. Whereas you end up fighting with these sort of faceless trolls that are happy to bully you and shout and scream names at you. So yeah, I think people should put the name. Like you say, there's always an audit trail, isn't there, of what you say on the internet, and that works both ways. It can defend you, but also it can get you in trouble, as I'm finding at the moment.
Do you know? Did you watch any of the Matt Taibbi hearings at all this week?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of the clips, really mainly on Twitter, but every single one has been, it's incredible. I've read his thread as well. Um,
Well, and it's I had Sam Faddis on. He's a ex-CIA guy that I've had on a few times, and we were talking about generally this week about. I had him on this week, but we were talking generally how when 1984, that book, you would read that book and say, man, this could never happen. But this dystopian world that we're in now, and as I'm watching, Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, and I'm hearing these, congressional people just grill them on things. And did you see the one about the threesome clip?
no, I didn't see that one. No.
I forgot who the woman's name was that was questioning him, but she was talking to Michael Schellenberger and asked about Barry Weiss, and I don't even think she realized that Barry Weiss was a woman, and they were saying how Barry Weiss was part of this, and the congresswoman said, so it was a threesome. And Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi just started laughing, and other people, you could hear people laughing in the background. But I as I'm watching this, the thoughts in my head are, this is where we're at. And these people have been put into power. They are useful idiots. And the scariest thing to me about all this, Doctor, is the fact that there are people that voted for this.
Yeah, we found that out, really. I changed that slightly to useless idiots now, because they've had their use, haven't they? But you look in academia, you look in education, you look in medical profession, you look in government, and like you say, these people are in place, and you can't. I mean, I have more in-depth academic conversations with my dustman and my postman outside my house than I do with senior academics from the medical world in my area that I work in. So, it's really bizarre that these people, they don't seem to have the academic critical thinking, appraisal ability that I was taught at medical school. And I don't know whether that's a university thing, an institutional thing, where you just taught to follow the group thing, follow algorithms, and everything that you read in the textbook is true, as opposed to critical think. Whenever you see a medical paper, for example, you have to look at that paper, and it's not the gospel. It is literally, you have to look at it and you have to critique the methods. Are there any flaws in the methods? What does the data actually show? What they're saying in the conclusions? Is there any flaws in it? And in critical thinking, look at the data from a statistical perspective. Are there any statistical flaws in it? And people can't do that anymore. And I know the difference between the scientific training from my first degree and what we call the MBCHB, which is the MD program in the UK. It's very skeletal learning. You'll do a week or two of, this, that, and the other. So you'll do a couple of weeks of obs and gynae, you'll do a couple of weeks of pediatrics, etc., and then move on. Whereas science looks at root cause and the depths of all the things I've just mentioned. So yeah, and this goes across, university to educational, government stuff, and how these people get into the positions of power that they do is just beggars belief, really. And we're seeing that play out now. It's gone from the sublime to the ridiculous, and we're just seeing, well, there's a phrase in the UK, you couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, and that's what I'm seeing at the moment. These
Wait, say that again. Say that again.
You can't organise a piss up in a brewery.
A piss up. What's a piss up?
A drink, getting drunk.
Oh,
so you can't organise a drinking party in a brewery. That's basically they're useless at what they do. There we go. That's a new one for you.
Yeah, there's a new. Who made that?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. It's just a phrase that we use.
That should be a shirt.
Basically, you can't
put that on a
It's
coffee
like
mug.
kind of equivalent of a chocolate teapot.
You should put that on a coffee mug.
Definitely.
Well, and as I'm, the other thing with that too is, people. I mean, it's like the bigger problem now, and it's it's on a world level with this, because people just blindly. Ed Dowd said something the other day on a podcast. This whole thing with COVID, this is the first time in history that the whole world governments were in sync together. You've never seen that before. And yet
Yeah,
people still don't
everything has
want to
been
wake up.
lockstep, hasn't it? It's been that everything's been coordinated, and again, it's where I have to kind of try and stay away from speculation, really, and trying to conclude what the hell is going on here. But like you say, it's all been significantly synchronized across the world in lockstep. And even like we've seen this week with the Twitter files at the Congress meeting, we've seen it with the censorship and the gain of function being confirmed, and the sort of lab leak theory not being so much as a theory as everyone was told. The conspiracy theory has come correct. And likewise in the UK, I don't know if the USA have covered this, but our government official, our senior health secretary, who couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, he literally, there's exchanges between him and other senior government officials. And the expose has been that we've seen the exchange on WhatsApp between these government officials, and there's things that have come out such as we need to scare the pants off the public, and mocking people that they put into quarantine facilities, and they've made sure that they put people that are sort of celebrities and sports teams in the box rooms of the Premier Inn, which is kind of budget hotel in the UK, and they're mocking them, and they're saying, when are we going to deploy the next variant, in inverted commas? And you can see the conversation, and this has come out in the mainstream media. And the reason for mentioning it, there's no coincidence that the Congress stuff's coming out in the American states, and it's in sync with the same thing. We've had a couple of very high profile jab pushers in the UK have people on this week and let them speak, saying that all these conspiracy theories have come correct. These conspiracy theories were absolutely right all the way along, and the government have treated us all with contempt. And the guy let the other individual speak, and normally we would cut him off. There's little bits of leaks into the mainstream now. I mean, I've been trying to speak on the mainstream in the UK for many months now to debate, just to put that other voice to the narrative. Been rejected. No one on the ITV, BBC, Sky networks will have anyone near. We've got one channel that's kind of pioneering on that, and even then they're pushing people that are pushing boundaries off the screen. So there's a chap called Mark Steen who has been shining a lot on vaccine injuries, and just recently, I mean, he's been done for having interviews with actual vaccine injury victims and people that are widows from this, that have lost their spouses from it, holding their death certificates up on camera. And for that particular interview he did, he's been kicked off by Ofcom, which is the regulating agency in the UK, and so he's lost that job for speaking out and not towing the party line. And a lot of their presenters are getting shouted at down their earpieces all the time to stop when they get to a certain point. But that narrative, the other side of the narrative, don't ever present a balanced view. You've never seen on mainstream media that the opposite of what they're repeatedly saying has got a counter argument at all.
Now, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Who is it? Mark? You said Mark Stein, right?
Mark Stein, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that with him because he lost his job, right?
Yeah, he did. I mean, the guy himself is vaccine injured. He's had heart attacks recently. He's had I don't know whether it's 2 jabs, and he's not been well with his heart. A lot of people that have spoken out, we get called anti-vaxxers, but I myself am a vaccinated anti-vaxxer, apparently. Mark as well. And also we've got a politician that's been brave enough to stand up, and all he really did, his name's Andrew Bridgen, and he stood up in Parliament and just said, look, guys, doctors are telling me about I'm not an expert here. Doctors are telling me that there's lots of problems with this vaccine. We need to stop and halt this and investigate it further. And actually made a reference to an Israeli doctor. And he made a reference which, looking back on, he probably wished he never. But he said something like this Israeli doctor told him that the death toll from the vaccine would be on par, or words to that effect, with the Holocaust. So Holocaust is obviously an emotive word, and the next minute he's over the front pages, suspended from Parliament for being an anti-Semite, which is really bizarre. So there's this cancel culture around, anyone who doesn't toe the line, and that's the same in myself, where I've been kicked out of my profession now for speaking out locally. People put the phone down on them when they mention my name, and all I've really done is stood for a very narrow range of issues. I've kept it very matter of fact. I've gone for ethics of informed consent, bodily autonomy, non-coercion in medicine, and valid refusals of consent, all clumped into one. I've seen these vaccine centres in operation. They herd people like sheep. They give 20 seconds to the patient. They don't tell them a single thing, and then it's too late by the time it's injected. Number 2, safety in pregnancy and safety in babies. So these cases, there isn't a case for any benefit, let alone the risks that we're seeing in those cohorts. Lockdowns and masks, which I think are completely, the cases are closed on that. There's been a recent Cochrane review in the UK that has basically looked at meta-analysis across the world, studies of masks, and they don't do anything. They're pointless, useless rags that you put on your face, more as virtue signalling. And lockdowns, my concern was always collateral damage. collateral damage of the lockdowns. And, we're seeing that now in the health service. People have delayed diagnoses, the mental health crises, children with their mental health, children with their speech development delays. And the final piece of the jigsaw that I spoke about is vaccine injuries. Every single day of the week now, I'm spending time with these poor folk that took the vaccine for the absolute right reason. At the time, it's safe and effective, they were told from above, and they did it for humanity. They took one for the team, and sadly, since that day, and for the reasons they took it, for example, there's that aspect to it, but also practical reasons. We were not allowed to travel. We were told to take the vaccine for your job, which is why I took mine. I was heavily coerced to take my second jab. And these people have paid the price with symptoms of, severe disability, neurological problems, autoimmune problems. Some people have lost limbs because of it. Some people have died. They've lost their lives. They've paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I've took these death certificates to my colleagues and said, look, these are vaccine-induced deaths. It says it on the death certificate. And yet my colleagues would then go off and use the exact same vaccine that same afternoon in a clinic of 500 locals from Penzance. It's incredible.
Now, I've had, John Mott and Alex Mitchell.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, Alex. Yeah, John Watt, yeah, as well. Both of them. Yeah, I'll speak to them.
I said John Mott. Did I say John Mott?
Yeah, John Watt. Yeah.
John Mott, somebody else. Yeah, so I've had both of them on here, and man, it. I carry so much sadness for what has been done to people, and I know people personally, parents. I tell this story all the time. There's a woman up in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is 2 hours north of where I live, and that's a mecca for Olympic training for running, because they can't afford to live in Boulder, and so they train up there. And this woman, she had blood clots 2 days after, I think, getting her first shot, and since then she's had 7 blood clots, appendicitis, and COVID.
Yeah, exactly that. And so this story, I keep saying to people, everyone knows somebody, whether the individual affected knows it or not. Lots of people have been brainwashed into believing their long-term outcomes from neurological problems or autoimmunities from the initial asymptomatic COVID infection, which just doesn't make sense. People are being told that by senior medical doctors that your neurological symptoms that happen to come on 2 weeks after your booster were from an asymptomatic infection you had 8 months ago, and people are falling for this nonsense. And everyone knows somebody. Everyone I speak to knows somebody that's been harmed. And from what I've found in the last few weeks, a lot of medical professionals know exactly what's going on. They just don't want the Dave Cartland treatment. I've been blacklisted and shunned and ridiculed, and reputation's gone now. Hence, I run a private service now. But the fact is, it shouldn't come down to that. It should come down to a healthy conversation. Not one doctor in the last 2 years has actually debated me and sat down in a coffee room and said, Dave, you've got this completely wrong. In fact, my appraiser, who is kind of a doctor that looks over your training, every 3 years you do a revalidation, but every year they touch base and do an MOT test with you. And in the integrity and honesty section, he wrote to me and said basically what I should have done, and I'll quote him exactly, is realise that in the NHS you work for a consensus opinion. And what you really should have done was keep your head down and shrug your shoulders. That's what you put in black and white in an appraisal. So this is what we're dealing with here in the medical fraternity, that what I should have done was kept my mouth shut and not rock the boat and keep to the narrative. And 99.999% of doctors are doing that. The fact they're doing this around victims of people that have done something for the right reasons, and sometimes for the fact of just being released from freedoms they shouldn't have really been locked away from, such as travelling or going to weddings or funerals. They had to get vaccinated for that. The amount of people I ask now retrospectively who are injured, why did you do it? They say they did it to go to a boxing match, they did it to go travelling, to go to a wedding abroad, etc. It's just nonsense, and then they pay that price. And blood clots is one, neurological problems is the next, and cardiology, myocarditis in particular, and as you mentioned, sport. The people are dropping like flies. There's a period just after the booster went out where I watch a lot of live sport, whether it's golf, tennis, football, pretty much everything. Big sports fan. And people were dropping like flies. If it wasn't a player on the pitch needing a defibrillator or collapsing unconscious, that it was somebody in the crowd. They'd stop the footage, they'd stop the game. There's a medical emergency in the crowd. And it was happening every single weekend, at least 2 or 3 times. And one of our football commentators in this country, Matthew Le Tissier, he spoke out about this, lost his job, all for asking for FIFA, who are the regulatory body in football, to investigate the massive uptick in on-field cardiac events. And that data stands the test of time. You can't you can't argue with that. I think the last 30, 40 years worth of on-field cardiac arrest has been surpassed in 18 months of post-COVID time, and that's the same. Lots of things like, miscarriages, vaccine adverse events, cardiac issues after the vaccine. These figures stand up to scrutiny, because if something's happened in the last 2 years massively above the baseline, what's the common denominator? What have we done to the whole world's population, or the vast majority of it? What could potentially be this uptick? And rather than actually include it as a potential cause of it and have it in the differential diagnosis, people are dismissed. And the patients I speak to, there's a very uniform way they get spoken to by the medical profession. They'll turn up and say, I was previously healthy, gym goer, 24, took the vaccine to go to a wedding, and 2 days later, this, that, and the other happened. And then the doctor would say pretty sternly, this is absolutely nothing to do with the vaccine, nothing at all. And then proceed to kind of get quite irritable with the patient, defensive, aggressive, almost dismissive, definitely. And then just gaslight them. A lot of patients, I get told now, without investigation, without face-to-face assessment or touching the patient, that they've got anxiety, mental health problems, or what we call functional neurological disorder, i.e. they're making it up. And sadly, that's only a diagnosis when you've excluded pathology. So if you've scanned them and done scans of spine and head and nerve conduction studies, etc., you can then say, we can't find anything here. So, are we dealing with a functional neurology, which is basically, it's to do with, you need some counselling and mental health support, really, in that respect. And but these people are being told from the outset, often via a telephone call, because in the UK they're still doing this shenanigans of not seeing patients face to face. We're still doing it. These doctors are still doing telephone calls. They're still, they're 4 or 5 vaccines down now, and they're still petrified of this virus. Petrified. You see it all the time. I've just walked through a hospital on Monday, and they've got people with masks on their chin, 2 masks on the face. Visors, worn the correct way. Visors worn up from the chin seems to be the latest trend. And then people with these face masks on, with the hoods on, with God knows what's being pumped out of the backpack, but whether it's oxygen or not, I don't know. But it was like a bizarre sci-fi movie walking through the main concourse of the hospital on Monday. It was bizarre. What's going on?
I for a while I was saying, because you were seeing all these like European international soccer and runners that were having these issues, and I thought to myself, I'm like, in in America, you haven't heard anything about the NBA, the NHL, NFL, and MLB. And I thought, I bet you they didn't get these shots, and I still don't believe. I don't believe a LeBron James or a Tom Brady. I don't care what these politicians say. President Trump said he got all 4. I don't believe it. I don't believe Joe Biden. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it, because there's more risk than reward for them to take these things. I mean, can you, excuse me. Can you imagine if LeBron James had myocarditis?
Yeah,
this is the thing. There's no way he took it. There's no way.
The problem is they're bound by contracts and all that comes with the contract with the NBA or the American football. I don't watch much of it, so whoever operates, I'm showing them my Britishness here by knowing absolutely nothing about American football. But yeah, it happened, didn't it? I saw it on that chap who had the on-field cardiac arrest. He had a strike to the chest and he collapsed. I forgot his name.
Yeah,
and, you saw it in the interview afterwards where...
Sorry, I interrupt for a second. So that was Damar Hamlin. So where I was going with this was then that happened. And I'm like, well, shit, maybe some of these guys... Maybe the lower paid guys, the backups, starters that had the name notoriety. Because again, I don't believe the high profile athletes in these sports got this thing. Do you think LeBron James, he said he did, but do you believe he got it? No way.
Absolutely not. There's no chance. Anyone who's anyone really, I don't think you don't see the same sudden adult death syndrome statistics in politicians or senior officials or senior sports stars, like you say. It would just take one person to come out. And you saw that interview with the fellow you just mentioned, forgot his name now.
Damar Hamlin.
Sorry.
Damar Hamlin.
And, you saw his face when he was asked straight, about vaccines, and he clammed up and he said, I can't say. Well, he didn't really comment. He said, can we change the subject or words to that effect? And you can tell a lot by people's body language, and you see that with all the politicians now. They're sort of shuffling around, they're sweaty, they're uneasy when they're talking about facts that aren't facts, essentially. So, yeah, it's incredible. It would only take one footballer to come out in the UK, soccer player, to say, high profile, that, I know a few people that have had heart problems since. We know that, during the pre-season, we saw a lot of players were absent from team sheets, and you just know that those are the players that were wise or didn't take it. But there's been a lot of saline doing the rounds, and I'm certain of that.
Did you think when Damar Hamlin fell like that, did you think that was a heart attack right away, or did you think it was vaccine related?
My opinion of that is it was too quick. It's like instant. I mean, if it is to do with the impact, and that does happen, it does happen. You can have this is why you should never do a precordial thump in somebody that hasn't got a certain sort of arrhythmia during an arrest. So it can happen, but it was instant. It was like beyond instant, wasn't it? It was immediate. And so, had he stumbled around a bit and then gone down, then you'd kind of understand it. But yeah, we can but speculate, hey, but only he knows how many vaccines he took. And this is all we've asked for, transparency. We had a spike in, for example, neonatal deaths in Scotland. So when a baby dies, there's a massive inquiry about it. And there were two, I call them mini spikes, but anything more than one is too many. And we asked for a public inquiry into it. And the whole thing around, we can't do an inquiry into it because it's going to affect vaccine hesitancy and confidence. What work is involved here? Ask the mom how many vaccines she had, and if it's every single mom of the 30 deaths had the vaccines times 3, then you've got a correlation that really needs investigating there. The same here with the myocarditis issue.
With these people that have had these injuries, what do you think the likelihood is that they will ever life will be back to what it was prior to the injury?
It's difficult to say because a lot of things weren't looked at in the trials because you look at Pfizer, for example, when I've looked at the trials in great detail, the Pfizer, and aside from the fact of what they did or didn't find, which wasn't particularly conducive with it rolling out to the world's population, what they didn't search for, they look for immunogenicity, i.e. they look for an immune response. They look for very little else, to be honest. And we're using a gene product here, and it says it in its own documentation. I've held these documents up to camera and read them out where it calls them gene immunomodulatory treatments. Not conventional vaccines and all the technical issues related to it. But one thing they didn't do was look at biodistribution. So where does it go in the body? They didn't look at how long that lasts for, to answer the question that you mentioned. They looked so far as 6 months. How long is this mRNA being expressed as spike protein? Then they stopped looking and it was still on an upward trend. So it's not as if it had come down to baseline and then you can say safely that this is on its way down. You're probably going to express this for 9 months after your vaccine. And that's it. And that's quite a long time for a vaccine, really. It should go to the deltoid, immediate but local response, and there's your immunity, immune cell memory. But they never did anything like genotoxicity, reproductive toxicity. And again, then you can't really, for any 100% certainty, then turn around and say, these drops in birth rates we're seeing across Europe now, every country is reporting anything between 10 to, some of the Scandinavian countries are up in the high 30% drop in birth rates. Infertility, and you can't say it isn't to do with the vaccine because they didn't do the reproductive toxicity studies. And this is what's been bizarre about all of this. And the same, I mentioned earlier about my positions on children and pregnancy, and I've been begging for people to show me the data of, when you vaccinated your first mom in the UK, that was December 2020. Where was the data at that point in time when the first vaccine went in the first arm of the first lady that said, I'm willing to take this? Where's the robust data that showed it was safe and effective before that syringe was pressed? And it doesn't exist. That's a fact. You were excluded from the clinical trials if you were under 30, over 50, had any medical condition whatsoever, pregnant or breastfeeding, and certainly children were not tested. So where's this data from? And I've been waiting for 2 years for it to show me. There's lots of prospective data, as in we've looked at a bunch of vaccinated moms and this is how it turned out. That's not good enough. Pregnant moms, children, young, healthy adults, they're not lab rats. There certainly weren't paid participants in a clinical trial.
Do you think?
So, to answer the question, we don't know how long it takes. There's lots of detox stuff out there, protocols like the FLCCC. We've got one from the World Council for Healthier, detox protocols, and it's all about getting your immune system pepped up, get it back to scratch, and trying your very best to reduce inflammation in your body, looking at the microclotting aspect of. Because if you think about the first principle here, we're getting the human cells. We're not giving it an inactivated virus, attenuated. We're not giving it a protein, mushed up protein, what we call a toxoid. We're giving it a genetic instruction. So your human cells are absorbing this mRNA code and producing a protein that is not human. That's just a bad, flawed idea from the outset. And, they picked a protein, the spike protein, which is known to be thrombogenic, known to have easy access to cells, known to be pro-inflammatory and autoimmune. But, there's only going to be one outcome. If you're going to get a human cell to make a non-human protein, it's going to be, yes, to get an immune response. But does that switch off? When does it switch off? We don't know this. And so you were asking for autoimmunity from the outset flawed by its very basic design. But, there's a lot of money invested in mRNA technology.
Do you think that like a excuse me? Do you think a football player like Damar Hamlin, will he ever be able to play again?
Well, I mean, the thing with myocarditis is we don't know the prognosis. You hear from the mainstream media, it's a mild disease, it's transient, and you're absolutely fine. But what we're seeing more and more now are cardiologists are reporting that, they're seeing a lot of people in studies where they've done studies on people with no symptoms. So we're screening people for it and doing cardiac MRIs, and we're seeing subclinical myocarditis. So people are walking around with ticking time bombs on the chest, where they've got bits of scarring of the heart, but they're just not aware of it. So you'll go and play a 90-minute football match, and at the end, your heart will give way. So who knows? I mean, it depends on what that cardiac MRI shows for that particular American footballer. You don't know, and it's affecting cardiac. I mean, I'm not a cardiologist, so I can't say for sure, but from what I've heard and read from them, the prognosis isn't conducive with a rare mild complication that will just settle over time. It will leave a mark and it will affect your cardiac. If you've got scarring of the heart muscle doesn't regenerate. The same as the central nervous system tissue. That's the only two tissues in the body that once you've knocked a chunk of functioning tissue out, either through stroke or heart attack, it doesn't regenerate like the liver does, for example. And so you're stuck with that damage. So, if you're given a 25-year-old myocarditis, subclinical or presented with clinical symptoms like he did, had a cardiac arrest or whatever happened there, then who knows what the future holds for him. It's difficult. The ticking time bombs. It's hard to be able to reassure, isn't it?
The other thing too, miscarriages. You hear more about, and what is going to be the long-term effect of people that are vaccinated that had babies?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of the groups of people that come to me. I get lots of taps on the shoulder these days from professionals that have, they've seen my work, seen my interviews, or seen my social media presence. That's very limited to just Twitter these days. But they tap me on the shoulder and they say, "Look, we're seeing this," and they tell me. I mean, even this week, I've had a funeral director, a consultant pathologist, several medical colleagues, but in particular, the group that come to me the most and they're petrified to speak out, petrified, are midwives and obstetric doctors. And what they're seeing is exactly what you just said. They're seeing miscarriage rates going up. They're seeing crash sections happening more and more often. So emergency C-sections. They're rushing moms at the very last minute. They're seeing babies distressed. They're seeing when the birth has actually happened, they're worried about they're taking a bit more time to resuscitate babies. And the final concern is about placenta. People are looking at placentas and the condition of the placenta, which should be a kind of big, fluffy, pink, well-perfused tissue, like a jellyfish, if you like, but they're coming out very atrophic and dusky and calcified. And I know some of the American doctors have spoke a lot about this, but that can't be right. And then the children, who knows what the long-term consequences are from a child that's been chronically malnourished from the placental level after birth. One particular midwife said the babies are all coming out looking syndromic, was the word that she used. So I find that alarming, and who knows what the future holds in that respect. But, it's one of many, many, many alarm bells, and not just not being able to speak about it. I know James Thorpe speaks about it. Naomi Wolf has spoken about some of this as well. So lots of people are speaking out, but no one listens.
Are they all in your gang? Who's in your gang, Doctor? Who's in the cool kids club over in the UK?
Well, I mean, I would say I'm pretty lone wolf, to be honest, Mike. I'm a lone wolf in that I'm in all the groups.
Are you the Doc Holliday? Are you the Doc Holliday of the group?
Yeah, I mean, literally, I am a lone wolf. I mean, geographically in the UK, I'm pretty detached from everyone else. I mean, there are local groups of UK doctors that are starting to form and amalgamate. I'm in a group called Doctors for Patients UK, and we kind of bounce ideas off each other and strategize and things. But the American doctors, they're better organised and they're a bit more vocal. The Peter McCullochs, the Rob Malones, etc. And they speak out. A lot of the Twitter guys, I'm in groups with those. And they're all we're doing is churning out information to try and get that out. And if we have to post 1,000 times a day to convert one person from having another vaccine, I think we'll all continue to do that. So yeah, all of the kind of big Twitter presences really from America. So yeah, no one in particular, just keep in touch with most.
How are you doing? You've been very vocal and public about that you got the vaccine. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying to people, I don't feel particularly vaccine injured. I don't think there's enough in it, but I do notice that, it's particularly, I mean, the way it went, I took the first one and I was in bed for 2 or 3 days with a massive headache. I felt like I was having, the way I described it was electric shocks in my brain. I said to my wife, I do not feel right. I said, this is not of this world. And at that time I was happily, my friend had just died of what I thought was COVID, took the vaccine for that reason. It was a knee jerk.
When did you get it?
Ooh, no,
roughly?
probably January 2021, I think. But
So
I've lost track of the years at the moment,
yeah, me
and that's
too.
part of it. My brain. That's what I was alluding to. So I took the first one, and I was in bed for 3 days, and that was it. Got out of bed the fourth day, fine. Second one, I didn't notice anything at all. I didn't even feel it going. And so, consequently, the last few months, I've just noticed a slow progression of brain fog. That's the only way I can call it. So, kind of cognitive. It's not happened in this interview, but I'll lose my train of thought after an exhaustion. So, I'll do 2 or 3 patients in the morning in terms of consultations and feel like I need to go to bed. So that's all for me. But I do take a lot of the supplements like the FLCCC stuff, lots of things to boost the immune system, lots of things to reduce inflammation. Things like vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium. There's lots of anecdotal evidence. That's the problem. You can't even get doctors to admit vaccine injuries a thing, let alone invest in massive studies to show. So all I've got really to go on is anecdote. So where patients come to me and say, for example, I've had a neurological consequence of the vaccine injury and I've had some hyperbaric oxygen and it's worked really, really well. And so I'll pass that forward to somebody else and say, you had a similar presentation to this person. And so I've built up a kind of list, a repertoire, my own kind of protocol between sort of Zev Zelensky's and the FLCCC and the World Cancer Health and some rabbit holes of my own. Then all you've got really then to rely on is people coming back to you and saying, actually, I feel a lot better, and that does happen. Whether it's placebo or not, there may be a bit of that at work as well, but it's all about supplementation and getting healthy, getting your gut biome right, getting just generally nutritionally sound advice, and getting the supplements going. So yeah, that's the story for me. Brain fog and cognitive exhaustion, I guess, is the best way to think about it.
How does it happen every day, or do you have some days where like how often?
I find it's something. I mean, it tends to happen a lot more when I don't take the supplements. Believe it or not, it's just like a few weeks ago, I thought I'm going to test whether it's placebo, whether it's because I think I'm taking the supplements. I feel fresher and sharper, so I stopped taking the vitamin, particularly the vitamin B complex, and that's pretty good for neurological function, just generally, and good for immune function. And I noticed it by the end of the week. It's like your batteries run out. It's not happened yet, touch wood. So today it happened in the first consultation I did this morning, and my brain just kind of misfired, but I'm back at it now with coffee.
And a mic. We're back at it with coffee and a mic.
Coffee and a mic, exactly.
So when it does happen, do you lay down right away, or how do you treat it in the very, very short term?
I'll just apologise to the patient in front of me and say, I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fog again, and then it'll pass. It's just like a bit like when you just misfire and you don't remember the word you're about to say. It just happens just too frequently. Look, I played a lot of football in my life, and I'm not going to pin it on vaccine per se. I've headed a lot of footballs in my time, and maybe there's a bit of an element of that since I retired from the game, but it's just not pleasant when it happens. I feel like my brain's aged to about 60, 70 these days, but there's obviously a bit of stress involved as well.
Do you think over where you're at in the UK, are they more waking up to understand what's really transpired?
On the surface, no. The message is consistent. It's safe. It's effective. Take 15 boosters. I exaggerate about 15 slightly. They're on to about 5 or 6 now. But the message hasn't wavered, the official message. But all I can say really is the contacts I have with doctors that have been hardened, what I call vaxaholics, pushing the vaccine at an extreme level to man, woman and child. They contact me, and I've had a couple of apologies, not enough. I've had a couple of people say, you are actually right, Dave, but I can't say anything because I remember the one person said my hands are tied and did a gesture that, they acknowledge that everything I did was for the right reasons. I've had practice managers when I've applied for jobs in my locality saying, Dave, you're absolutely right. Your CV came in last week and it caused quite a stir. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, well, they said that you're a crazy anti-vaxxer. So I went off and researched you and I Googled you and I watched a couple of your interviews. And actually, patient safety is at the centre of what you talk about in all things, and data, and you're really brave. She said you've got balls of steel. That was the exact phrase. Anyway, I didn't get through to the interview process for that job either. I've applied for 22 jobs in Cornwall and I've had zero interviews. Bearing in mind I'm an ex-A&E doctor, I'm a GP, I'm a biomedical science first class degree graduate, done a master's, published scientist, and still can't get an interview. I was absolutely fine before COVID, by the way, before I spoke out. I had 100% strike rate on jobs. I've got every job that I've ever applied for. So I can't correlate why that's happened other than People associate whistleblowing with a negative thing where, in this profession, you're supposed to be encouraged to, without retribution, be able to speak out safely if you think something's unsafe or the system's not right, or, you think your consultant's been drinking while he's doing surgery. You should be able to think, go to your boss and say, this is my concern. And, if you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you need to have your seniors come to you and say, look, you're wrong here, you misrepresented the data. But the data is so black and white nowadays, and I've not seen the shift, to answer the original question, towards people speaking out and being confident to speak about, because they are in fear of their career, their finances, their reputation, and they see fellow whistleblowers like myself and any previous whistleblower, to be honest, get the treatment that, you get shunned, you get blacklisted, you get your reputation completely damaged. And there's no one to answer for that, really. People are allowed to say no when you apply for a job. Where's the audit trail on that being a discriminatory thing?
Yeah, I don't know how do people trust these health, these institutions after all this? Here in America, the CDC, large healthcare systems. I don't trust any of them.
No, it took many centuries to gain the trust of patients. What I say about the role of a doctor is doctors are there for the patients in some of the most emotional, intimate, private moments of their life. You go to your doctor and tell them your deepest, darkest secrets, and that trust is a massive part of that. And like I say, it's took decades, centuries to build that up. Something like this, like I say, the people who come to me now, it's because they can't get into their own GP, family doctor, but when they do, they're just dismissed and gaslit, and some strange behaviours I've been witness to, unfortunately, from people, and I think that trust is irrevocably damaged now. I don't think it's coming back, unless people stand up now. This is their time, and I've been begging people for the last 6 months, if they really do think that they've been, part of something that they shouldn't have been, vaccinating babies, for example, speak now, and a bit of humility goes a long way. If somebody stands up, there's a recent chap in the UK who was very pro-vaccine at the start, by the name of John Campbell, and he's got a massive following on YouTube, and he was very pro-vaccine, and he presents his data with he holds documents up and draws on the page and explains things really, really well. But there was a midpoint where he just realised that what he was presenting just wasn't right. It's completely switched, and he was a data follower. So early on, he was reading and interpreting data and presenting it, maybe, I'm not going to say anything against John, but incorrectly. And now he's come back and he's realised that masks don't work. He's looked at the excess mortality data in great detail. And what he did, I think the reason his conversion story has been resonated with the public is that he apologised. He said, sorry, I've misled people. And that's really important to get the trust back. I think a group of doctors need to stand up and say, yeah, we should really not have been vaccinating children. Hands up. Mistakes are made, and that in any walk of life, that makes a lot of difference to any argument, whether it's a marital spat or argument between teammates on a football pitch, or the scientific medical community to the public, that they've been misleading. The media as well. The media need to come out and say, a lot of people are turning now in the media, changing their mind on what they previously proclaimed. There's a lot of turncoats going on, a lot of rats scurrying to the sewer from the media world and changing their tune and scurrying off. Piers Morgan, I'll name him, for example. He was very, pro. You're not part of this society if you're unvaccinated. What an ignorant soul you must be, to completely, twisting it around to, these conspiracy theories are correct. There needs to be some justice here. There needs to be some recompense for it all. So an apology goes a certain amount of the way to rebuild the trust, but there has to be some justice here. These people have willfully been blind to what's been going on.
Yeah, see, you have more faith than I do these days, because I don't think any of that's going to occur, and I also think that now we're moving into it's a dawn of a new day, and we can talk about variety of kind of lanes where this is all changing, right? At first, I think like the universities, schooling, that is all in the process of changing, and it's layered. It's not just one thing, but over the last few years, you've looked at like the education system, at least here in America, what they're teaching these kids, both in the public school systems, up through high school, as low as elementary, and then you go into these colleges and you see these videos where these, conservatives go on campus and these kids are spitting on them, screaming at them. And I have to think, as a parent, you're like, I'm not paying for this. I'm not sending my kid to this. And how many different degrees are out there that they don't help you with anything. They don't prepare you for any type of real life situation. Now you fast forward to the healthcare systems. These big, large healthcare systems in America, like the Cleveland Clinics, Cleveland Mayo Clinic, so on and so forth, they have these huge overheads that, one, there's no the trust isn't there. Two, I mean, more and more people are going to be being out of work. And three, how do you cover all this?
Yeah, when you think about medicine really as a career and big pharma in particular, your consumer base is sick people when you think about it. So it's bad for profits. It's not a very good business model if big pharma get everyone well, let's say, and that's probably all I'll say before I get shot by big pharma in the back of the head. But yeah, and as you've mentioned, institutionally, I've been through university for many years and 10 years, in fact, and your program learned. You're just given algorithms and textbooks and given gospel facts, that cannot be questioned. And if you do, you're pushed out. You can't have any of this free thinking, and you see that in the consequences of graduates that just can't think outside the box. And you're seeing that COVID's a great example. And we're in funny times really, in that we're in a woke world in inverted commas where anyone can be anything they want to, say anything they want to, be intimate with anything they want to these days, and actually anything goes except if you disagree with the media narrative on coronavirus or certain issues like that, and then it's okay to bully and harass and call names and other things that wokeism kind of prevents you from being. So yeah, it's a strange world we're living in at the moment.
But I also, people have taken all of this for granted, and I'm talking about America here more so, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. But for too long, people in this country have taken all this for granted, and this happens in other countries. This can't happen here, right? We don't know what hard times are, and I think this week, to me, this could be a very, very rough road ahead for us. And I think Silicon Valley Bank, we'll see where that goes. But I think that gave people a glimpse of, how things, well, I think COVID gave people, understand how things can drastically change, overnight. But the Silicon Valley Bank, I'm interested to see what road this takes us on.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we live comfortable lives now, don't we? In this last decade, in particular, we've got a population where we're free to, everything's at the touch of a button, at a fingertip. We get instant gratification. We've lost those skills, those basic skills, as you mentioned. When we were younger, we'd be out, playing and doing the things that we used to do 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But nowadays, it's all very techy. So it only takes like the digital system to go, the internet to go, the electricity to go, and then we're right back down to basics, and people haven't got the skills to survive that. So as you mentioned, we've got used to a good standard of living now and take it for granted. Many people do. And if it goes, like you say, the Silicon Valley thing just shows how quickly things can change. And once the domino goes, the rest follow, don't they? So interesting times lie ahead. It's a time to be alive, isn't it?
Well, and you saw yesterday in New York City, there were people lined up at Silicon Valley Bank. I don't know if you saw that video or photo where they were lined up and they had to call the cops. They couldn't get their money out.
Another Simpsons prediction come correct. I saw that. I posted that on Twitter just about that. Again, Simpsons have got an uncanny way of predicting these things, and they've got literally Silicon Valley Bank and people queuing up to get their money out. Interesting that. But yeah, it's there's going to be the problem. Something like that, it's going to trigger a massive amount of civil unrest. Imagine if your bank account's suddenly empty tomorrow because the internet's gone, and not to scaremonger, but that's going to trigger all sorts without, like I say, meaning to stimulate anything. But yeah, it's everything's poised very, we're on a precipice of a completely different era now. Hopefully it never happens. Hopefully we carry on like we are, to be honest, but I can't see it. I think there's certain processes have been started now. We started, so we can't end it. And these have come from different organisations a lot higher up. The World Economic Forum, I'm going to sound conspiratorial now, but the people who own the world, essentially, the people who own the big financial institutions, they run the world. And like you said, this was conspicuously lockstep and synchronised across the world. This was, and linked with that great theory of the Great Reset. That you've got to make what's in place seem, either break it or make it seem like not the best option, and this is the new option. This is the Great Reset, and whether you like it or not, it's coming. So
I was in 2008. I was working in a retail bank here in Arizona, and I would open up people's bank accounts, and people would come in during that time. I was young, so I was, had I not been working that job, I really wouldn't have been in tune to what was happening. But I'll never forget. It was the first time I'd ever seen people just scared, and you can tell. People are scared. They don't think clearly. And people would come in. I'll never forget this. They would come in, and they would want to withdraw large amounts of cash. And we had safety deposit boxes in the branch, and they would take these large amounts of cash and put it in their safety deposit box, which I thought was funny because if the bank is closed the next day, you're not getting in there. There's 4 metal doors to get into that safety deposit box.
yeah.
But people just weren't thinking clearly.
Yeah, you see, that's exactly right. What you just said, fear drives certain behaviours, and we've certainly been part of a massive military psyop, and fear has fueled all of it. The irrational decisions of medicine, science, governments. It's just been driven by fear, and that's where we've got to have a bit of humility to the people who fell for it, the people who did get vaccinated, even some of the doctors that have, just ignorantly kind of gone along with what their bosses have told them. There's got to be a little bit of leeway, albeit now I think that horse has bolted now. So yeah, strange times ahead, and you're right. Fear is at the center of it all.
Don Serber, who he has a Substack, and so I subscribed to it, and he had one of his articles said, what do you say? Masks worked, but just not on COVID.
Yeah, it did exactly that. So just the masks on its own. I mean, I remember really well when the pandemic started, and I don't know if it happened in America so much, but the first thing people spoke about when they talked of lockdowns and they talked about all the social distancing, people raced out to the supermarkets and they stockpiled, and I've seen footage of people fighting each other for toilet rolls. Did you have toilet rolls?
Yeah, which I would love to know the backstory of who started that original message, because you couldn't find toilet paper, paper towels, Kleenex, hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer, I guess I can get. I understand, but toilet paper.
The rice and flour was the other one. You can get a bag of flour you had to ration 1 bag or 2 bags per. And people were fighting over each other for that. They were literally brawling in the shops for their toilet roll. And then you got entrepreneurs charging like £10 for four rolls, and people were paying it. So again, fear drives irrationality, and we've seen that it's been played really well in terms of the people who are at the top of this plan, or even if it is a plan, I don't know these days what's going on.
Wasn't sugar the other thing? I think sugar was hard to find too.
Yeah, sugar, all of the sort of staple things really, but it just brought out a certain human nature as well in people, that you see a glimpse of, what people are capable of when it hits the fan. People will fight each other, people will climb over each other and elbow old ladies out of the way to get that last bag of flour or that last toilet roll. And why would people think about wiping their backsides? What's the first thing that comes to mind in a worldwide pandemic? How do I clean my bum? Is that really what human nature's come to? Is that what it's about? But anyway.
No, and that's a scary thing to me. You saw the way that people reacted 3 years ago, and I think we're in for some very, very difficult times, and I don't think we're that far off from it right now. And how are people? When I go into a store, I'm constantly looking around, and I'm one of those people that's very easily distracted. But I'm looking around, and I think to myself, how many of these people really understand, or could have a conversation like you and I have had for the last hour? And how many people would want to have that conversation? People want to ignore this, thinking it's all going to go away. And I just don't believe that this time.
Yeah, it's gone too far. I think the people who have perpetrated it want it to go away. They'd like nothing better than to do it. But the second best is a slow drip feed, as we've seen the last few days and weeks. As we mentioned, the WhatsApp files and the lockdown files, should I say, and what's been going in Congress with they've confirmed the leak theory is correct, and the censorship was absolutely right. And so this drip feed of like slowly bringing people to the reality of what this was. I mean, really, when you think about it, all those 3 things alone, the way the government have spoken about people in the UK, particularly through the Matt Hancock exchanges on WhatsApp, the fact that it's a gain of function virology lab leak, and the fact that all doctors and scientists on the opposing side, they should be up in arms. The public really should be up in arms, but there's an apathy about it. People don't seem to be bothered unless it directly affects them. Boy, it is going to directly affect them soon, but unless it's literally in their sphere immediately, there's no action. And that's what we've got now, an apathetic society that don't really care unless it affects me, myself, and I, as I call it. People are very, attention's turned on themselves and how they, how life is for them, as opposed to anything higher than that. People are very selfish now.
What is life like in the UK right now? I mean, we have in America, we don't have a border. That border is gone, and people are flowing in here from all over the place, Central America, Afghanistan, you name it, China, the drugs that are coming in here. I mean, there could be a nuclear bomb that be smuggled in, and I don't know that we would know it. So, in the UK, I know that's been an issue for a period of time. What is life like there now?
I've got to try and keep positive, but it's hard to these days. So, I mean, we've got everything going on here at the moment. We've got drag queens reading stories and twerking in front of our kids in libraries, number one. Number two, we've got, as you mentioned, the problem with open borders. We've got literally dinghies floating in every single day of the week in record numbers of young male migrants, economic migrants on the whole. I'll put my neck on the line and say that. We've got a very generous system in the UK where you can float on over on a dinghy, disperse yourself. Sometimes you're shipped in by the local RNLI and you're given, whether you're legal or not, or you got papers or not, you're put into a hotel. You put into quite a good hotel as well. I mean, some of these are spa hotels from 4-star and above, and you're given a card preloaded with cash. So pocket money. You're not subsequently being billed for anything. You're being given a pretty easy life on the back of what would be a bona fide refugee. But people are piling in now, and they're being put up in these hotels up and down the country. And we're now hearing reports where these hotels are being filled with young male military-age men. There aren't any mums. There aren't any children in tow. So read into that what you will. And you can't get anywhere near to the entrances of the hospital, not the hospitals, the hotels. There's people that try and record exchanges with the concierge and the reception, and they can't get close. You're not allowed a camera to see what's going on, but you can catch glimpses of people being fed and watered and living an okay life. What that's about, I don't know. But there just seems to be no regulation. You can just, float on in, and, not only float on in, you can get actually escorted in. Now we're seeing footage from Ireland where these young men are coming with suitcases on coaches, convoys of coaches, and landing in parts of built up Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and they've been unloaded. I mean, you've not come on a dinghy, have you, if you've got your suitcase and you're clean shaven and you're in your best gear? So whatever's behind that, I don't know. I mean, that will come to pass, what this represents. But yeah, it's pretty much a free-for-all, despite what the government say.
What about the crime aspect of, say, so you're in a suburb of London, or where are you?
I'm in the middle of nowhere. I've gone away from inner city. I've gone down to the sort of rural place. I'm in a farming village, essentially down in Cornwall. But I can only see what social media shows me, that around the areas where these hotels are, and I know that that's the same in Newquay, which is local to me, but other places there is, sexual harassment of women, crime activities increasing. You see footage again doing the rounds on social media of certain behaviours that are not conducive with Western culture. Let's say, it's bizarre what's happening, and I just keep asking how has this been allowed to get to the point that it's at now, and what was the benefit perceived from this massive influx of people? That, I mean, cultures are cultures at the end of the day. It's not a racist thing to say that an Eastern European culture is different to a Western European culture, for example. An African culture is different to an Asian culture, and a Far Eastern culture is different to an American culture. So, but if you start mixing everyone suddenly without any regulation, there's going to be culture clashes, aren't there? And that's what we're not regulating.
Yeah, I'm going to quote Michael Yon. He always says, you follow Michael Yon on Twitter, the war correspondent?
No.
If you're not, if you don't, you should. He's incredible. He was the one. I swear, I wake up every morning. I'm like, where's Michael today? Because he'll go from like Florida to the Netherlands to the Darien Gap. I mean, he's all over the place. He's in the Netherlands right now. There's a big protest going on there today with Eva, another famous like journalist, or Dutch journalist. But he spent some time with Jordan Peterson. Covering the farmers. But anyway, he uses the line, some fish don't swim in the same pond. And when you're talking about the UK and, Western European and those different, they just don't mix.
Yeah, and the problem is though, people aren't allowed to speak. I mean, I'm even conscious of saying what I've said already in the last couple of minutes, that there'll be some comeback from it because suddenly you'll get slurred like as a racist, and it's not about that. I've got friends of every religion, creed, color, culture in my own personal life, so it's not about that. It's about suddenly making changes to, certain societies, and you've got to make sure that that's done in a certain way, gently and slowly, and it does work. You see that, across. I'm just thinking of an example. So we've got, when we build houses in the UK, when you build a new estate, you have to have a certain amount of social housing. And that the whole purpose of that is so that everyone mixes together in society, and, the community builds itself together as one great sort of group of people. And that's the right way to do it with, that principle is what we should follow in that respect. But yeah, strange times now.
How many times have you been called racist? So this doesn't even matter anymore. Probably all the names that you've been called in the last 3 years. What's one more?
Yeah, water off a duck's back. Or a racist is not anything I've been called, to be honest. So we'll see what happens after this interview. But yeah, I'm not racist in any shape or form. But like I said, it's about cultural awareness, isn't it? And making sure, for example, well, I've said the examples, haven't I? So
I don't know what the term would be for me. I don't like hanging out with people like that are better looking than me. I want to be the best looking guy when I'm in a room. So I hang out with people that are uglier than me because it boosts my self-esteem. So there's a term for that. I think all the guys that are better looking, they should wear masks because that'll help me. That's not a crime, right?
Wasn't it, that looked at people wearing masks and people who they gave marks out of 10 or something for people's looks, and the ones who were the low end of the spectrum in terms of 1 to 5 were wearing masks religiously. So yeah.
Well, what was really funny is you like the grocery store I would go to, and I go to it all the time, and there were some people that I had met, they were wearing masks when I met them, right? And you don't know what they look like. You can see, how they're built, but you don't know what they look like. And you have this vision of what you think they look like. And then they take their mask off when they didn't have to wear them anymore. You're like, whoa, that's not what I expected. It was just kind of funny.
About the mask, though, doesn't it? The mask is literally, you get so much from a person's face, from the lower eyelids down to their chin, and when people take it off, you're surprised by what they look like. You miss all that non-verbal communication, and that's why masking kids, for example, was a bad decision. Not only in speech and language development, but emotional development. We need to see each other's eyes and faces, and the mask itself, it drives fear into people, doesn't it?
And how these kids, the time that they've lost and the psychological damage that they've suffered through all this. I don't know how you bring some of these kids back. I mean, some of them, I had doctors on. I mean, it was Rennie Moon said she wanted to take a mask off a kid. The kid came to see her. Kid was having a panic attack. The idea of not having it on.
Yeah, we've developed again, and that's a natural consequence of this. People have got that, that comfort blanket of the mask, and also, we've got a massive group of germphobes now. People that are OCD about cleanliness, this whole washing hands incessantly all through the day, and protecting. And we see that when people were on lockdown and they went back to their schools, they all came down with bugs because the way the immune system works, for example, is based upon being challenged consistently. If you live in a sterile environment, washing your hands 80 times a day, then you're never going to come across bugs to challenge it. Are they going to come back from this? It's hard to say, but we need to recognise the problem first and offer them that support. But it's not being acknowledged. The BBC in the UK have just reported just incredibly bad journalism, that there is no mental health consequences to lockdowns. I mean, it's just careless journalism, when I don't think there's anyone living at the moment that's lived through the pandemic, in inverted commas, that has not been adversely mentally health affected by it, whatever way, whether it's anxiety or stress or insomnia or germ phobia, OCD, everyone has. So to come out with a headline only 2 days ago that it's affected people's mental health, not at all. It's just insane.
What about the fentanyl problem? Are you guys experiencing that like we are in America with fentanyl?
Fentanyl, no.
Fentanyl is the drug. The materials come from China, and then in Mexico they've put it in pill form. And now they've put to the point where they've put it in different colors, so it could look like an M&M or Skittles, and people are overdosing on it.
No, that's not made it to the UK shores yet anyway, in inverted commas. I'm sure there'll be a time for that.
Yeah, I was just with the drug. I mean, the drugs have got to be flowing in there, maybe methamphetamine but fentanyl, you're not something you're familiar with.
Not personally, no.
No, no, no. I just from a standpoint of like in London or in the UK.
No, like I say, I'm pretty remote these days. I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I don't really. Yeah, I don't know.
Mm.
Is the answer to that? Sorry.
You like being out in the remote area? You prefer it?
It's very different. It's very different. So built up, obviously, yeah. It's very different to being around the sheep. So I've got farmlands around me, and everyone knows your business. That's probably the hardest thing. Everybody knows who you are, and in the circumstances of COVID, that's not a positive. So I'll go to an urban area, and I've just attended a protest in Oxford for what we call, I don't know if 15-minute cities are making their way to you yet in the US, but essentially locking people down in certain zones, and it's just very Hunger Games, to be honest. So I went to a protest, people coming up to me saying, "Oh, Dr. Cartland," snapping me, and selfies. And I come back to Cornwall, my home village, and people are like, "It's that crazy anti-vaxxer again," walk the other side of the road. And it's very unusual. I won't say too much because I've got to continue to live here in the village, but very odd mentality. But it's a beautiful place. I've got to see, 10 minutes in every direction. And it's the rugged coastline of Cornwall is very different to anywhere else. It's got its own microclimate as well. It's a great place to visit.
What do you prefer though?
Oh, I like to get back to urban areas, but briefly. Like I love to go into London for a few days, but you sort of wondering about heading back. You can't wait to exit. So I've been to New York a few times, and the hustle and bustle of it, and I love it for the 2-3 days I'm there. But then it's quite happy to be back on the plane and head back to the middle of nowhere. It's just quiet, actually. It's quiet, and you can keep yourself to yourself, and that's what COVID's done to me. Really, it's made me become, I enjoy my family a lot more, enjoy the people that are directly around you that actually have got you back. The amount of friends I've lost for having this position on ethics, safety, and evidence-based medicine just shows what real friends are. So yeah, it's been quite refreshing to come down here in my personal circumstance. But
Any plans to come to America?
probably visiting. Yeah, I think I don't even know what the COVID restrictions are these days, but yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to go to. I'm a Christian, so I'd love to go to Grace Baptist Church, John MacArthur's church. I think that's California, is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So I'd love to go there just to meet John MacArthur. But yeah, it's an unusual place in terms of America. We've got very different in each state. There's different rules from, because I do a lot of exemption certificates for people to get to America. And for example, New York and California particularly are quite difficult to get into, whereas you've got Florida and other places are a lot more relaxed about the rules. I mean, I think most people are relaxed now, but back in the day, you couldn't get into New York for love nor money.
Yeah, I think it's May 10th now. You don't have to show proof of vaccine anymore to enter the United States, which, this is another example of they just want to hold on to this power a little bit longer, and keep it, extend it for as long as they can.
I find it really odd, even, if I've not had a vaccine, that's got absolutely no consequence to your health if you've had four. You're protected if your vaccine works, then what are you bothered if I'm not? I never understood that. And they were in the UK, they were going to sack. I mean, they did sack a massive amount of carers for not being vaccinated. And the next step was to bully 100,000 doctors into submission and take the vaccine. And eventually they stopped that from going through. But it wasn't done with humility. It was done with almost threatening, this is for your patient's benefit. You need to do this for humanity. And if you don't, you're pretty much not a good doctor, let's say, to paraphrase. And then they kicked the can down the road and said, right, we can't do this. We can't be doing without the 100,000 doctors. But it's all been about control, hasn't it, really? None of it's made sense. And particularly from an immunology perspective, my first degree had a lot of immunology to it. And, things like, you can kill your granny with a disease that you didn't know you had because you had no symptoms. Just an insane concept. This killer disease that you don't know you've got, you could kill her with. We're being told that. Don't hug your gran. It's just insane. Asymptomatic carriage of a respiratory tract disease, nonsense.
I had he's an industrial hygienist Tyson Gabriel on, and he was talking about how asymptomatic they were using these faulty PCR tests to come up with a theory of asymptomatic people could cause the spread of COVID. And I saw, there's a woman that she was flying. I'd seen her in the morning, and she was flying out that night, and she's like, I just took a COVID test yesterday just to be safe. I'm like, are you sick? No. And I'm just like, this is what this has done to people.
Yeah, people say, they're onto their fifth bout of COVID after their fifth jab, and they keep saying, imagine how much worse it could have been. And they don't question that it's failure of treatment, let alone the statistics don't actually, back that opinion. It doesn't keep you out of hospital if you're COVID jabbed. it doesn't stop you from dying. And they stopped producing the statistics in the UK at the time when it was getting silly. Like 80 to 90% of people vaccinated for COVID-19 fully were going into hospital with COVID and dying of COVID. And the penny still doesn't drop even to this day. People don't. But as you mentioned, that it's been a pandemic of testing. There's no doubt about that. Then, and the two tests they use, I remember firstly the lateral flow tests, the near patient tests. I mean, we took a massive box in our surgery. And I remember the doctors at the time picking them up and saying, these aren't worth the paper they're written on in terms of the false positive, false negative rates. And the PCR, I've used PCR in my own, scientific background, and it's not meant to be used for the reasons it was mentioned, mass testing for viruses. You can give everyone HIV if you test anyone's nasal passage or blood and rack up the cycle threshold to what they were using in the hospitals. Everyone in the world would have HIV if you tested for that HIV genetic sequence, because if you turn up the cycle threshold to a certain degree, you get false positivity, and everyone has a big step up once you get to a certain cycle threshold. So everyone gets the disease that you're looking for. So, there was a control of waves in that respect, in that waves happen when they needed to happen.
Oh, where can people find you, Doctor? Where can people find you?
Not many places these days. So I've got an account on Getter. I've got an account on Twitter. My handle's at Cartland David. That's the only two places now. Everywhere else I'm shut down from. So that's about it. I've got a YouTube channel as well. I try not to mention COVID too much because it'll get shut down.
What's on tap for you for the rest of 23?
I've set up, that's another thing I forgot to mention. I've set up my own private kind of off-grid medical advice service now. So it's under the website. We bought the domain drcartland.com. So if you go to that website, you'll see what I offer in terms of, it's an international service actually. So it's based on a Zoom. It's a telemedicine service. So people ring me for, although I am a GP of 15 years experience, I've got ability to operate off-grid as a health advisor, clinical navigator, signposter. I call it kind of an official Dr. Google service. So rather than Googling headache and coming out with brain tumor, you can run it by a doctor. So that's going really well. Apart from that, no one will have me at their surgeries. So I'm hoping that will grow. So do get in touch if you have any clinical questions or anything.
I'll give you last words, Doctor.
Yeah, my last words are going to be towards the medical profession, just to ask them to show humility to their patients, to, remember your Hippocratic Oath. Remember your Hippocratic Oath, which is primarily first do no harm. And, however deep in this you think you are, speak out. There's a chance to still, even now, to get back from this. And I've been through it. It's not as bad as people will make out, And think about humanity, think about your family, think about your friends, and speak up and have courage.
Well, I thank you for speaking with me today. Thank you for everything you're doing, and look forward to more conversations with you.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Cheers.
Mic drop.